So today we have another modern poem from the modern period by W.H.Auden, Western Hugh Auden. And this is actually not the first time we study a poem by him. We have already discussed The Unknown Citizen. But today we are going to see this particular poem, which is also one of his famous ones. And it is related also to one of the important themes that expresses and shows the kind of let's say the kind of society that we have in modern times. And from the title, which is here is written in French, Musée de Beaux-Arts, we can tell somehow what is the poem, or what is the main idea in the poem. Actually, the title is a name of a place, and it is the Museum of Fine Arts. But where is it located? The information that we know about the poem tell us that the poem's title referred to the Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels, an institution Auden visited in 1938. So our poet Auden has actually visited this place, this museum, and there he saw a number of paintings by a famous Flemish painter who's called Bruegel, Peter Bruegel. And they are actually, I think they are gathered in the same place inside the museum. And as he was looking at each one of them, he came across a number of them, but one of them actually attracted his attention, which was entitled Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. And Icarus is very well known to us as students of literature, as readers of literature. I guess one of the most famous Greek myths is the myth of Icarus, who was given wings made of wax made by his father, and he didn't take the advice of his father by not flying very close to the sun, because the sun would cause these wings to melt down. And usually it is associated with reckless, ambitious people who feel that they should fulfill their aspirations regardless of any kind of advice given to them. So this is the story of Icarus. It's very, very well known. We know that he has fallen from the sky because of his ambition. Someone like Peter Bruegel decided that they wanted to depict this event, this incident, the falling of Icarus, in a painting. And it is not just the falling, but also what the landscape. There is a landscape of the place. Maybe this is just the painter's imagination. He imagines what is it, or what does it look like, this place that Icarus has fallen in. And this is really interesting, actually, to think about an incident. Maybe you all the time hear about this incident, you read about it, but to imagine what does it look like, to visualize a place or the landscape in which it is taking place, this is, I think, one of the interesting things about this painting. And if you look at the painting, indeed, if you look at the painting, here it is, we will see that actually it's very beautiful. The colors, the depictions, the elements inside the painting. And if we look at them closely, the first thing that would attract our attention here is, you see, this part of the painting, because it is or it seems to be very close to us as viewers, as if this part of the painting is close, very close to the where we are standing. And here we see the plowman, and he's not just standing, he's doing his work. Okay, he's blowing earth. He seems very engaged, actually, to in his work, to the point that he's giving us his back. You cannot see his face. He's engaged in his work. And if you look here, somewhere, maybe somewhere lower in in the painting in lower place, this is a shepherd, and the shepherd is looking in this direction. Okay, and here we have the dog who accompanies the shepherd, and here we have the sheeps. You see, they are eating, they are engaged also with something. They don't look around, or they don't seem to be bothered by anything. Okay, here we have, if you look here in the horizon, here we have the sun. This is the sun. This part of the painting looks very bright. Here we have the sun, and here we have ships, few ships that seems to be far away. They are sailing, and here we have a faraway city, and this is another ship which looks very close to us. And but if you look uh, at the direction, the ship is heading to the sea. Actually, it has just started its journey. And when you come to this corner of the painting, what do we see? We see this is a fisherman. He's fishing, he's doing his work, and he also seems very busy doing his job. Here we have a bird, okay? And here in this very tiny detail here, these are two legs. Whose legs? Of course, we are talking about Icarus. So we can imagine that from this whole painting, which looks really filled with details, with elements. Where is Icarus? He's here in the corner, barely seen, just the legs. And he's drowning, he's sinking. But what about all these people around? Can't they see him? This is really confusing, because each element here, each one of these people here, seems to be engaged with whatever he's doing, and they cannot see him. And this is something really strange. And we're going to see how this painting actually captured the attention of Auden, and he based the main idea of his poem on this painting. To know more about Auden and his poetry would help us actually in order to understand the poem. Auden composed Musée de Beaux-Arts in December of 1938, less than a year before the start of World War II, and this is important. The timing here is important, since we all know the influence these wars have on the modern society. We are going to see that the poem depicts main ideas that show what kind of changes happened in let's say, on psychological, on social level, in the modern society. In terms of Auden's style and the way he is going to um, show us these ideas, and this is really important because we need to know something about his style. Auden wrote that insofar as poetry or any of the arts can be said to have an ulterior purpose, it is by telling the truth to disenchant and disintoxicate. So for him, for Auden, poetry and literature, maybe most of us think that arts in general, literature, poetry, these things, um, their function is to make us feel maybe somehow relaxed, or escape from reality, or to think in terms of imaginary places or people, to be amused by them, to enjoy them. But for Auden, for someone like Auden, he feels that poetry and arts in general should tell the truth. But how? What's the way that we should follow in order to tell the truth through poetry? By in what? Disenchanting and disintoxicating. He feels, or he thinks, that when we write literature which make people enchanted with some imaginary feelings or ideas or places or people, we are not telling the truth. And not only we are not telling the truth, we are also not helping people to see things for what they are in real life. Okay? So what should we do? We have to disenchant and disintoxicate and de-romanticize, to take this romantic way of thinking out of literature and try to show things for people and shock them with the reality of things, by shocking them, by showing them that things they are not as romantic as you think. Okay, things like what? Like, for example, look here: death, martyrdom, and suffering. These are actually great things in life. These things are, let's say, incidents or events in any man's life that causes great influence on them, whether psychologically, whether emotionally. But with Auden here, he's trying to tell us that even these great or huge or extraordinary things, actually they are not as great as they seem. Okay, and he's trying to do this through poetry. Okay, and the technique actually he's using, or the device, is what we call juxtaposition. Of what? Of ordinary events with universally recognized extraordinary ones. Okay, through making these kind of juxtapositions, he's trying to show us or make us shocked, surprised by how things actually are in reality, not like the way we think or we romanticize about them. Okay, so let's start the poem here and hear the text, because here we have a very long line. I didn't want to break it down, so I placed the text here above and some notes here underneath. What does it say? About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who didn't specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. Actually, from the very first line, he gives us directly the idea he's going to talk about suffering. He's going to say something about suffering, and this is a very general idea if you think about it, because suffering is something very common to all mankind. And he says that, so he says, the old masters, how well they understood. Who are the old masters? Actually, Auden, after walking in this museum and after he saw many paintings by Bruegel, not only Bruegel, of course, he has seen a lot of paintings that goes back to the Renaissance period. And he refers to the Renaissance painters as old masters. You see, he says that actually they were very skillful. They knew, or they have seen, truth about human life, and they have depicted this truth in their paintings. So when you look on these paintings, you could discover that. What is this truth? It is about human suffering, of course. But what is it? Here, you see, he's directly, and as you notice, Auden's style is very straightforward. Okay, he doesn't seem that he uses a lot of metaphors or a lot of figures of speech. He directly states in a very clear, direct language how will they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How does suffering happen, or when does it happen? When it happens, what are the other things taking place around? What does it look like? He says that when someone is suffering, if there is a kind of, maybe somewhere someone is suffering, maybe they are tortured, maybe they are having a hard time. In other places, other people, what are they doing? They are just living their life normally. Maybe someone is eating in the meanwhile. Someone else is opening a window, just having a normal day. Others maybe just walking around. And here actually the use of or it seems that he's trying to tell us that if I would continue mentioning things that normal people do in normal daily routine, actually they are endless. I can give you other things. Someone is eating, someone is maybe dancing, someone is going to their work, someone is sleeping, or so actually when we speak about the daily life, normal things in life, they are countless. Okay, and in the time that someone is suffering, there are countless of things happening at the same time. Okay, how when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth. And here this is interesting because since he's standing in the museum and he's looking around on famous paintings, actually he could have seen, um, and I guess this is another painting by Bruegel. Maybe you have seen this one here. And this painting is one of the famous paintings by Bruegel, which uh, depicts the time um, in which Jesus Christ was about to be born. Okay, and in this painting, if we look at the details and if we analyze the details, of course, not all the details, but the important ones, here, this one here, this is Virgin Mary, and she's pregnant. Okay, it is a time around which Virgin Mary was about to give birth, to deliver Jesus Christ, the miraculous birth that he refers to here, the miraculous birth. Whose birth was miraculous? We all know. Jesus Christ's birth was miraculous. And this is an extraordinary event. But it is placed in this, notice in the painting, as I have shown you. Okay, sorry, not this one here. The miraculous birth. Look around in the painting. This is very similar to the landscape that I have shown you. Here also, this is a scene from a village. Look at the people around. Each one is, each one is busy doing their job. Here we have, here and here we have skating people, children skating. Okay, so at the time that something miraculous as the birth of Jesus Christ was taking place or is going to take place soon, what about the people around? They were what? The aged are reverently and passionately waiting for the miraculous birth. There always must be children who didn't specially want it to happen. We all know the story of King Herod, who, after knowing the prophecy about the birth of Jesus Christ, ordered the killing. Sorry, he knew about this prophecy, and he knew that the birth of Jesus Christ means that he's going to be the king of the Jews, and for him as a king, this was a threatening event. So he ordered the killing of children, and this is what well known in the Christian tradition as the massacre of the innocent, the massacre in which innocent children were killed in order to prevent any newborn child from maybe because they didn't know who's going to be Jesus Christ, who's Jesus Christ, one of these children, but who's he exactly. So in order to avoid this, he ordered the killing of all the children. Okay, so the children here, as he's showing us, Auden, who didn't specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. Okay, the ordinary here is juxtaposed with, look here, the ordinary is juxtaposed with the what, with the extraordinary. Okay, suffering, sorry, suffering is an individual burden. The ordinary happens in the same time that extraordinary events takes place. Actually, when someone suffers, this suffering is something very private to them. It's very individual thing. Actually, people don't usually understand or sympathize with others unless they themselves suffer the same. You see, this is a kind of truth actually. suffering is very individual burden, very individual event. The poet notes how an extraordinary event, such as the miraculous birth of Christ, is visually displaced by seemingly less significant image of children skating on pond. You see, actually, when you look here, this is Virgin Mary. She could barely be seen actually, and it's spotted in the painting. Okay, but if you look around, everything that captures your attention is what the people doing their job, busy with their life, children skating around, enjoying their time. You see, the extraordinary is placed in juxtaposition with the ordinary. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course anyhow in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the tortured horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. Now we come to the massacre of the innocents. Okay? The massacre of the innocents, as I have told you, is about the killing of the young children. And here is actually another painting by Bruegel in which he depicts the killing of these innocent children. And as you see, as you see here, this is the massacre. Children are being killed in different parts of the painting. We can see here, look at this one here, for example, this one here, this one also. But if you go to the lines from Auden's poem, what does he say? He says, the dreadful martyrdom. So the dreadful martyrdom is taking place. But even with this great and terrible incident that's taking place, it is just an event in the course of life. How does he show this? He says, look at, anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse, the horses that the torturers, the killers are riding. Look at them. Look at this. This is a horse. Look at it is scratching. Look at these. Look at the dogs. This is the dog. These are the animals he's referring to in the painting. They don't seem to be bothered by what's happening. Okay, or he's trying to show that in the middle of any great events, there are some trivial, very ordinary things happening around that makes this great, huge event seem very small, very insignificant. Okay, so the first martyrs of Christianity were the innocent children who were murdered by Herod's man even before Christ was born. In the painting Massacre of the Innocents, the heinous martyrdom of the infants is set against the normalcy of the daily life, the dogs and the horses in the scene. Okay? Now if we come to the final part, and here we're going to see what Auden is doing. At this point of the poem, okay, Auden moves from the general to the specific. Here he's going to speak in details about Bruegel's Icarus. Okay, in Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. There is a disaster that took place. A boy has fallen from the sky. You see, the plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry. Imagine Icarus when he started to fall down. Of course, maybe he have cried, maybe he screamed. Okay, when he hit the water of the ocean, maybe this sound of splash came out. Is it normal that nobody has paid attention? The plowman is just doing his work, the fisherman is doing his work, the shepherd is looking on the other direction, right? Nobody has ever heard the cry or even heard the splash of water. This is a disaster that took place, but nobody seems to have noticed, okay? But for him, it was not an important failure, and he didn't pay attention. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing in the green, the white legs disappearing, he's sinking, and even the process, nobody noticed. And here's it's really interesting to mention the sun. Why the sun? What does the sun have to do with the fall of Icarus? Actually, it's because of the sun that Icarus has fallen. It melted down the wings, right? Water and the expensive, delicate ship. You remember the ship in the front that that was very close to us? That must have seen something amazing. Haven't you noticed? Actually, Icarus appears to be very close to the ship, right? A boy falling out of the sky. I mean, imagine, it's not just extraordinary, it's very strange and terrible and horrifying to see a boy falling from the sky and you have no reaction to that. You see, had somewhere to go, sorry, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. The ship didn't stop, the plowman continued working, the shepherd is looking on the other direction. The fisherman, who's very close, didn't do anything. And even the animals, we usually see that animals pay attention or know the danger beforehand and react. But the dog, you remember the dog I told you who was standing beside the shepherd? If you look again in the painting, look, the dog here is looking in this direction. The sheep, look at the animals, the sheep, they are eating. You see, busy eating, and they didn't do any reaction. Even the bird here, the bird standing here, and it's very close. One would expect that the bird should be frightened, maybe by the splash, the noise that Icarus is making as he's drowning and he's struggling to get out of water. But the bird is just standing there on the branch of the tree, very calm, and the ship is sailing, and it is indifferent to the falling of Icarus. This is a very, actually, a very harsh depiction of the point of indifference and carelessness that man has reached in terms of looking at others suffering. You see, so the famous Icarus, who didn't listen to his father's advice and flew near the sun with his waxen wings, is depicted falling in the water, yet all the people in the painting continue leisurely their work, neglecting the disaster. Even nature, look when he mentions the sun here, and even the animals, actually, animals are part of nature. Even nature seems to be indifferent. It's just another day, just a normal day. So what? Even if something huge or a disaster takes place, life goes on and everything is, let's say, moving in a normal course, okay, normal routine, right? And if we think about it, actually, this is not something old or ancient. This is something that we continuously or constantly see around us, even in our lives today. Okay, and this is the point, actually. If you think about it, this is the point that the poet is trying to show us. And if you have closer look, these are the sorry, this is the corner of the painting, the right corner, in which, if you look closely, if you examine it, these are the legs, and maybe this is part of his hand appearing here, and this is the bird, this is the fisherman. Everything seems very normal. If you look at the painting itself, you would feel that Bruegel is also trying to show us this idea. He's trying to communicate this idea to us. How? If you look at the painting at the first glance, you couldn't see Icarus, because he's very tiny, just his legs, and they are very tiny, and in the right corner, barely seen. diplomat is taking the let's say the majority of the painting. There are other elements that attract our attention in the beginning, but if we examine it closely, then we are going to see Icarus. Actually, Bruegel himself gives this feeling or this impression that this is what he's trying to show through this painting, that this disaster is very small in front of the ordinary life, the course of life that goes on no matter what. Okay? Icarus is barely seen in the corner of the painting. His two legs are the only visible part of his body, which is sunken under the water. The fisherman, being the closest of all the people in the painting, seems to be careless and indifferent. He goes on fishing, unfortunately. So finally, what could we understand from this poem? Through these lines, focusing on the normalcy of the world in the face of the individual's disaster, Auden brings out the alienation and the isolation modern people feel. This is what modern life looks like. People suffering, individuals suffering, and no one is paying attention, and life goes on. You see? And this is part of the alienation that we know is a characteristic of modern society. Auden refers to Christian events in the beginning and then to the Greek myth of Icarus, which may indicate that even with the different cultures and traditions, human response, which is indifference and negligence, is the same. So actually, this is not, if we think about it, it's not something just related to the modern time. It is something related to the human nature. The human nature is all the same, whether we are talking about events in the time of Jesus Christ, whether the events in the time of the ancient Greek culture, whether we are talking the 20th century, it is the same. Human response is the same. Human nature seems to be the same. But in the modern time, it is more stressed and more clear to us because we know that the nature of modern times, people are more able to see the suffering now in our world of today, in our contemporary world. We are even able to see suffering in front of us, in the internet, in videos, on the TV. Not once, but many times they are recorded. The sufferings in our time are recorded, and we can see them multiple times. You see, and this continuous exposure to such scenes of killing, suffering, sometimes create this kind of cold atmosphere, cold response. We become very used to seeing these things, seeing people killed or tortured or suffering, to the point that we don't have any sympathy or a response to them. Okay? Juxtaposing images of suffering and tragedy with the banal actions of everyday life suggests that individual tragedies are individual burdens, as humankind responds with indifference. And I think never ever things would change because this is human nature after all. And I think this is one of the finest poems that show one of the really beautiful ideas, and this connection between art and poetry, between painting and poetry, it's very, very beautiful and interesting in this poem. This was all for Musée de Beaux-Arts. I hope to see you in next videos soon.